Go to Genesis chapter 2. We'll get there here in a minute. I will talk for a few seconds here before, and then we'll get to Genesis chapter 2. One quick announcement for VBS Sunday next week. So VBS obviously starts tomorrow, and if you remember last year we had the inflatables out there and did food, and we're going to do that same thing this coming Sunday. I'm sure Pastor will talk about it in church this morning, but we won't have class next week. There's just a one service in the auditorium at 10:30. So it'll be that service, the kids and everything. It's a special service for VBS. So we won't have Sunday school in here next week, back to normal after that. So just to say it here in a smaller group, but I'm sure, again, he'll mention it this morning in church, just to remind you. Okay, so last week we got shifted into the auditorium as well. Pastor's voice was struggling, so he asked me as I came in if I would just kind of take that hour to give his voice a break. So we were in there. So hopefully you were able to make it. If not, we kind of started on the transition into respect. So we've been going over the acronym couples for the ladies and how the men need to love their wives and ways that they can show their wife love and give their wife love, and understanding how they see in pink and how we need to work on decoding that message and treating them the way that the Lord would have us treat them, right? To love them as Christ loves the church. And then Pastor talked a little bit about it last Sunday as well. But as men, and as we transition here into chairs, the acronym for the wives to understand their husbands more, husbands always constantly still remember that this doesn't mean that we just move on from couples and we don't have to worry about being close and open and honest and all those things anymore. These are still things that we need to work on. Hopefully through the weeks that we went through that, you saw areas that you probably come up short in, or areas that you aren't as consistent in, and that's good. And it's okay to not be exactly what you're supposed to be, as long as you understand and try to work on the areas that you can do better at. So this isn't a time for us to just kind of throw our arms back and say, I could get used to this, listen to this, tell my wife how she should treat me. But this is for us to understand maybe even some misunderstandings our wives have, and how we as husbands can make that easier for them. How we can be more helpful in some of the areas that as a man, maybe the way that God made us is what it is, and maybe we struggle in even understanding ourselves how God made us and what we need. And so this is an opportunity for us to try to make it easier for our wives to be the wife that God wants them to be for us, as we try to be the husbands that we are supposed to be for them. So the first letter is C, is conquest. We'll just go through these. So conquest, hierarchy, authority, insight, relationship, and sexuality. Those are the letters and the things that, for a man, how we spell respect, and how we interpret our relationship with our spouse, and things that, right, if we go through the energizing cycle, a husband needs respect, and when he gets respect, he treats his wife with love. His wife needs love, and as she's loved the way she needs to be, and we want to be on that cycle. That's where we want our relationship to be. We'll get off it sometimes, and the crazy cycle might start up, but it's okay to, as long as we see that, we understand that, and then we try to stop that from happening and get back on the energizing cycle. So starting with conquest today, and it's easy to take that word conquest and say, oh, dominating, right? You want to dominate the relationship, and he's a man, so he's in charge, and he's going to put his fist down and stomp his foot, and I just have to, kind of wither into a little flower as he just steamrolls me. That's not the idea of conquest in this context. That's not not talking about wars where people take over countries and conquest that way. This is how God made a male, and what is just inborn in a man, and how he operates, and without even really understanding and thinking about it, how God made us to be. So conquest is the natural inborn desire of the man to go out and conquer the challenges of this world, to work and to achieve. And that's how a man, just in who he is made, in his DNA. He is built to conquer. He is built to achieve. He's built to work. That's how God made a man. God did not make a woman that way, right? And we'll get to that here in a moment. But when God made Adam, one of the very first things God told Adam to do is to work. It was the thing Adam was made to be and to do. Obviously, a relationship with the Lord is why God created Adam, is he wanted a relationship, and he wants Adam to want that as well. But Adam was made to work. And so the idea of conquest or adventure or to achieve and to work is just part of every man and who they are. And so if a wife is to understand, and if you can begin to understand or even understand deeper the importance of what your husband does to who he is, you can begin to understand how to communicate respect and honor to him. Right? Because sometimes when we talked about this before we started the acronyms, it's easy or it's difficult sometimes to show respect to a husband that's not loving the way he should be. Right? For a husband that's uncaring and not giving you as the wife the love you need, it's really hard to show that man respect. And you may feel like, well, he has to earn that respect. He has to treat me right before I treat him right. And that's the natural inclination, natural thing you want to do. But obviously the Lord tells us to do what we're supposed to do regardless of what the other party does. And that's in every relationship. But we're talking about the marriage relationship here. So if you as a wife understand how he sees love, how he sees respect, how he hears it, right, through those blue sunglasses and blue ears that he has, and then respond in those ways, you're one step closer to be able to communicate that to him in a way that he understands, which again will energize him. Will energize him to be who he's supposed to be and love you the way he's supposed to. So respect, and I'll make this statement, respect is something your husband he values more than love. Your husband values respect more than love. Now, before you gasp and say, what do you mean? He doesn't love? He doesn't care about love? Yes, he cares that you love him. And he does need love as well, right? We talked about that. Just because a husband needs respect the most doesn't mean he doesn't need love. Just because a wife needs love doesn't mean she doesn't need respect. But your husband spells love respect, right? Your husband understands love through the guise or through the glasses, or being understood. Being respected is how he understands love. So as a wife, you want to love him like you love him, and you want him to love you the way you love him as well. And it can be confusing sometimes when the husband doesn't love the same way the wife loves. Or the wife will just lavishly give this love to her husband, and he's just like, thanks. And she's like, that's all the emotion I get from all these flowery, dripping words of love I just gave you? I get thanks? And he's like, well, yeah, it's good. I'm glad you love me, right? He's so happy about it. And he is. Inside, he's happy about it. But the drippy, flowery, lovely language, it does not affect him as it does you, because he's not a woman. And God has not made him that way. God made him to understand love as respect. It's, again, we go back to the pink and blue, right? And understanding we see things, we hear things, we interpret things different. So God has made your man to operate in a different way than you operate. And you have to understand that. And you have to understand that when you're trying to show him love, like you want to be loved, he may not see it and may not feel it in the way that you want him to, because he doesn't see or feel things the way you do. That's not bad or wrong. It's just different. And so as a wife, you want to understand, or get to the point where you understand, how can I show him the love I want to show him in a way that he'll understand, right? In a way that he gets it, so that he's energized to give you that love you need and that you're trying to give back. That's the goal. So it doesn't mean that he doesn't value love, right? It doesn't mean that he doesn't value it. It just means that he understands love via, and I try to use a different word, but it's just two V's, via the vehicle of respect. He understands love through the words hard. When you respect him, that's how he understands love. I know I could say it so much better, but I just can't. So let's go to Genesis chapter 2. And I mentioned this already. Genesis chapter 2, verse number 15. This is, God says, and the Lord God took the man and put him into the garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. So these are one of the very first things that the Lord does and commands that he gives to a human being is to Adam. He puts him in the garden, says dress it and keep it. So maintain. He has all the food he needs. He has all the water he needs. The environment is perfect. There is no sin, right? The work isn't hard. He's not sweating. There are no thistles. But God still says, here's something you need to do. You need to dress this, and you need to keep it. You need to maintain and work in this garden. That's the very first thing that Adam hears and is given. And so the very first thing that a man gets is job, work. So the reason the drive of work makes a man that way is because God's the one that made him that way. The reason that most men, and I understand the culture and the society we live in today, that may not be as prevalent as it should be or as it used to be. But the way God made us as men is to work, and to work hard, and to be honest, and to work honestly, because our first work assignment was given to us as males from God. Was from God. God gave man a work assignment. The number one thing for a man to do is work. That's what he defines himself as. So after God did that, then he realizes, it's not like God's like, wait a minute. Obviously, God knew what he was going to do, but go to verse number 18 here in chapter 2. So he tells him to work and all these things that he's supposed to do. He gives him, says, don't eat this tree, don't go here. You can do all these things, but don't do this. And verse 18, it says, the Lord God said, it is not good that the man should be alone. The very first thing that God said was not good for all that he had done. He said, it is not good the man should be alone. I will make him an helpmeet for him. So after God tells man, you need to work, everything is great here, don't do this. This is the one thing that's off limits. You can have everything else. Don't do this. Gave you your right and wrong speech. Do the work. God says, it's not good that you're by yourself. It's not good that you're alone. You need somebody to help you. You need someone to be there to complete you. And he creates woman, right? So even in that perfect work environment, God knew Adam was still missing something. And as a husband, right, your wife is that helper. God made her that way. God made your wife to be your helper. And wives, God made you, once you were married, God made you to be a helper to your man. Like that's your job. That's your number one responsibility. Not to say that there aren't a lot of other hats you wear, a lot of other things you do, and a lot of other things you need. But your job, the reason God made Eve, is to be a help meet for Adam. So you as a wife, make your husband better. You want to write that down? You can write that down. I think that's biblical. You as a wife, make what's not good, good. That's what God said. God said it's not good for man to be alone, so he made Eve. So your wife makes you better. And you as a husband, you have to view your wife in that manner. That means when she says things to you, you're like, nah, or don't make sense to you, or you just completely don't see. Your wife is making you better. Okay, and not to say she's perfect, not to say every time she suggests something, that's exactly the way it should go. But the relationship is built on, man, you work, you have that communication, and now you need somebody to help you, to make you better. And that's what the Lord made Eve for. Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 11. 1 Corinthians chapter 11. I should have marked it. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse number 9. We'll start with verse number 8, actually. It says, for the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man. Neither was the man created for the woman, but the woman for the man. For this cause ought the woman to have power on her head because of the angels. Nevertheless, neither is the man without the woman, neither woman without the man in the Lord. For as the woman is of the man, even so is the man also by the woman, but all things God. So Paul kind of just goes, and we could go to way deeper than what we're saying here, but in that verse, he's saying the woman is made for the man. And again, it's not to say that a woman is subversive or less than the man, right? God made them equal, but our roles are different. So the woman, Eve, was created for the man to make what was not good, good, to make it better. And that is the role of the wife. So your husband, wives, needs your support as his helper, needs the encouragement, and needs the respect of the wife to make him who he's supposed to be. And this is why, in my thoughts as the longer I teach this class and as I see my kids grow up and I see people getting married that I knew that weren't married, why I realize and will continue to kind of beat that drum is that who you marry is probably, besides salvation, the biggest decision you'll make on this earth. Like the most important one. That way more important than anything else is who you marry for both parties, for the husband and the wife, because you get to where one of you is just not caring what the Lord wants them to do. Man, it can really throw some wrenches into the whole works. But if you have a husband and wife that both want what the Lord wants and will work through the difficulties, work through the mistakes, work through the imperfections. And the husband will love like he's supposed to love, and a wife will understand her role and support and respect like she's supposed to. I mean, it's awesome, right? We've all had days, hours, we've all had minutes where the marriage was great, right? There's been spans of minutes where the relationship was perfect and everything was awesome. And the fulfillment you get, I'm being sarcastic. Thanks you, James, for laughing. No one else did, but thanks, James. But yes, his wife is not here. But she'll listen later. But the fulfillment you get, and you understand when you've had those times, when the fulfillment you get of that closeness, right, and that encouragement from each other and the love and respect, when it's energizing, when it goes the way it's supposed to go, there's no relationship like that. Your best friend doesn't give you that. Your parents don't give you that. Your kids won't give you that. That's something only you get from your marriage, and that's the way God made it to be. And so we want it to be like that more often than not. And that means us understanding our role. So for a husband, his need for you to motivate him, to energize him, to respect him, and give him that respect in that way is how he feels love. And that motivates him. Because your husband deep inside, regardless of where he is today, and he'll have ups and downs, and he'll have days where, I'll be honest with you. I always don't know if I should say these, but sometimes I'm very transparent. Last Sunday, walking in here before Pastor asked me to teach in there, I told Lisa as we're walking up, I was like, you know what? I am not feeling it today. Like most days, I can't wait to come in and teach and talk. I would have, if I could have turned around, gone home, and just got back in bed. Not because anything was wrong, not because I was just human. I was just selfish and tired and bleh, and I didn't want to do. I didn't want to be on and do the things, right? So we have days, men were like, we don't want to do and accomplish. But who we are made to be is we yearn to do. We yearn to accomplish. It's not an option, right, for us if we are true to who God made us to be. Working and doing is not an option. It's the essence of who we are. And this is an example of why we know that's true. One way we can know it's true. Anytime a man is introduced to a man for the first time, they've never met each other, first time, this is so-and-so, this is so-and-so. Oh, what do you do? That's the first question a man will ask. What do you do? What's your occupation? What do you do for a living? What's your job? And he'll say, this is what I do. What do you do? And that's where the conversation begins. And often in that situation, that's where the relationship begins. The relationship begins with two men doing their job, which is who they are. And as a woman, it could be, we can take it to an extreme, and we all know those workaholics that do work at the sacrifice of everything else, right? And that's not okay. There needs to be a balance, but we define ourselves by what we do. That's how we're defined. That's how we think of ourselves. That's how we evaluate ourselves as a man. When we look at it ourselves, if we're honest with ourselves and our success in life, or where we've attained, or how we feel like we are in that moment, it's a lot based on who we are by what we do. Not to say that our family doesn't matter. Not to say that we aren't who we are because of our marriage to our wife or our children. But God made us to work. And it's just innate inside of us. From the time you're a child, from the time little boys grow up, there's something about a little boy that makes him want to be an adventurer, makes him want to explore and be conquest. Not to say that girls don't have some of that spirit too, but the boy who he just grows up, he has that in him. He wants to go out. He wants to climb that tree. He wants to explore that grass. He wants to build that fort. He wants to fix that bike. He wants to take that thing apart and see what's inside of it. That's what boys want. That's what boys want to do. And even no one has to tell him that. Just like no one has to tell him to lie. No one has to tell him to sin. It's just part of who he is. He wants to do. And as we grow and become grown men, now we're just little boys that still want to do, but we're just bigger. And we have wallets and we work for money. And now we have money to do things that we wish we could have done when we were 10. But that's how men grow. And think about your little boy. If you have little boys, ladies, think about your little boy as he grows, and he'll grow up to be a man someday. And think about your relationship with your husband in the area of respect and understanding. And we'll get to some specifics here in a minute of respect, but understanding who your husband is and his job. Because I know a job can be contentious in a relationship sometimes. You can feel as a wife that your husband's job is his second wife. That your husband jobs take so much time away even from your relationship that you can kind of become bitter at his job and the devotion and commitment he has towards his work. And it can make you upset. And so you kind of feel like you need, as a husband, you need to give your attention to your family and love me as a wife and love your family more than you love your job. And you can get mad that he struggles with that. And or that he maybe has a hard time balancing that. And so you might cut down his job. You might find the negative things about his job and try to minimize the importance that he is to his job in order to hopefully bring him to give more love to the family and to you with the time that he would take away from that. But what you're doing when you do that, you're cutting him off at the knees and saying what you do is not that important, hoping that he'll say, well, okay, well, then I'll give my attention over here. But that's not what happens. What happens is he puts even more attention into work because now his supporter, his cheerleader, is telling him he's not doing a good enough job over here and trying to minimize or criticize what he does as his living. It's not going to cause him to say, okay, I'll bring my attention here. He'll put more attention into that. And he might even put up walls that don't allow you to bring that into his head because he knows it's affecting him. And so you as a wife might be your way of crying out, love me. And he's pink sunglasses and ears, that's not what he hears. Now men, you need to be cognizant of that too. You need to understand your wife needs your attention. Your job is important. That's who you're made for. That's what you're made to do. But you committed yourself to your wife to love her like Christ loved the church. Jesus wasn't off just doing all the things and not paying attention to people. Jesus started the church because he loves people. He loves us. And so he did everything for us. He didn't go off and find his own thing to do and ignore us. He gave us all the time. He did what God wanted to do. He did his Father's will, but he also loved. And so as a man, we need to understand that we can get there. And it's real easy for us to get there, especially at tough times, busy times, when things change, shorthanded, whatever the case may be at your job. Requires more of your mental focus, more of your even physical time. It's very easy as a man to just dive headfirst into work at the expense of everything else. And we have to understand our propensity to do that and make sure that we are cautious to not overly do it, that our wives feel neglected. And she may not be, and I know. She doesn't understand, right? You have to put that extra time in if you want to continue to live the way you're living. If you want to continue to have what you have and be comfortable, these things are the required things. But your wife needs your love, and you need to be aware of that. You can go too far if we're not careful, and she needs that love. So go back, though, to your little boy, moms. Consider your little boy. When he grows up to be a man and he finds a woman that wins his heart. I know it's never going to happen. He's going to be the age he is forever. But when he does grow up and he goes off to college or he goes out into the world and he's 20-something years old and he finds this girl and he just falls head over heels for her and he loves her and they get married. Now you have a daughter-in-law. How do you want your daughter-in-law to treat your little boy? Do you want her to treat him like you treat your husband? And I'm not saying this because you don't treat him well, but I'm just saying think about how you treat your husband. Or you want that girl, whoever she is, to treat your little boy with all the respect that he deserves in your eyes as a mom. He deserves to be respected. He deserves to be elevated. He deserves to be loved and cherished by everyone as much as his mom does. But if that girl that he marries treats him the way you treat your husband, will she fall into that category? So look at you through those eyes. Not to say your husband's your mother-in-law's little boy, even though he is, leave and cleave, right? But just to put it in context, to think about how you treat your husband, how you treat his job, how you treat who he is. When's the last time you thanked your husband for going to work? And you're like, wow, that's his job. That's what he does. Okay, that's true. That's what he does. But when's the last time you thanked him and showed him respect for getting up when he gets up, for going and putting in the hours that he puts in, and still doing the other things that he does? I know he's not perfect. I know there are things that need to be fixed at home that he has ignored for 2 months. I know that because that's me. Okay, but when's the last time you thanked him for just going to work? Your husband needs that support that you want your daughter-in-law, future daughter-in-law, to give to your son. He needs that support. He needs that respect from you. You want a simple but effective way to show respect? That's very simple. Thank him for what he does. Thank him for going to work. As simple as that. Be impressed by what he does. I don't care what he does. I don't care if what he does is super mundane and boring and lame and is easy, and even a caveman could do it. I don't care what it is. Be impressed by what he does. Ask questions about what he does. Show interest in what he does. And if he comes home and he talks about work and things that he did, show as much interest in his work stories, work things, as you want him to do when he comes home and you tell him about the things that happened in your day, with the kids, with the house, with whatever. You want him to listen. You don't want him to be on his phone going, oh, really? Wow, You want him engaged with you when you tell him about your day. So when he comes home from his day, act interested. I know, I'll be honest with you, making ice cream cones, it's not super interesting a lot. It's pretty boring. You got to be good at it. Don't get me wrong. You got to be good. There's an art to it, okay? But be interested in what he does. Be impressed by what he does. When you were dating, when he was wooing you, right? Everything he did was like, wow, he's just so amazing. Did you see he did? And maybe he wasn't working the job he works now, but if you were in college and he was on a sports team, you were like, you'd wear his Letterman jacket, right? Because you're so encouraged. Like, man, he's just awesome. You see, he almost dunked that ball. It was a layup, but he almost dunked it, right? Look how fast he is. You were just impressed by everything he did because you were in love with him. And you knew, even in those moments, you knew that showing him love is by being impressed by who he is and showing him respect for what he has done and who he is in that way. And when he was dating you, when you did that, when you were his cheerleader, literally or figuratively, when you were his cheerleader, I tell you, nothing will energize a man more than a woman that cheers for him. Nothing. You get that one girl that you can look out in the stands or look wherever and she's cheering for you specifically. A guy is like 10 feet tall in that moment. Can conquer the world. He can dunk a basketball. He can do all those things. He can work harder. He can do whatever is necessary to make it work for his family when his wife is his cheerleader. It'll energize him, and he will feel love from you when you are his cheerleader. And he will in turn do and serve and show you love because you've energized him to be that way. Now, can you imagine if you have not thanked your husband for his job, not thanked him for going to work, don't even really care, don't want to hear what he does at work because he complains. I know. Don't want to hear about the complaints, don't want to hear about the things that went wrong. But understand, can you imagine if he never said, I love you to you? Like if you went a day, what if you went a week and he never said, I love you? You would be like, what's wrong? What's going on? Why, it would be unsettling. But your husband could go a whole week at work and never hear, thanks for working for me today. Thanks for working for us. Thanks for putting in the time. Thanks for providing. He could go a whole week without hearing thanks, and that's okay, right? And we look at it and say, well, whatever, it's his job. It's okay. He doesn't need to be thanked. And, he'll do what he's supposed to do, hopefully, because he's supposed to do it, because he's a basic man of goodwill. But if you want to energize him as a wife, you want to energize him, thank him for working. Be impressed by what he does. Let him know verbally. Let him know. Write him a note. Whatever. You're his wife. Do whatever you need to do to thank him for working, and whatever that requires, whatever that takes, whatever he understands. It would be inconceivable for a man to go a whole week and not say I love you to his wife. It would be a terrible thing. He'd be a bad husband. Men are often expected to do their job without complaint, day in and day out, and often without thanks at work, and then even at home. A lot of guys go to work all day, work real hard, and never get thanks at work. Right? They're never applauded. They're never promoted. They're never told good job from their boss or coworkers. And then they come home and their wife doesn't tell them thanks for working, good job. He gets none of that. And it'll beat him down. He doesn't maybe know it. He probably would never say it that way. But he feels love when he has a woman that believes in him, is thankful for what he does. Men will do amazing and sometimes crazy things for the admiration of a woman. Men will do stupid things for the admiration of a woman. You might have in your past for your wife, your husband may have done some dumb things to impress you. And you might have smacked your head and said, well, he failed. Or you might have been impressed. And if you were impressed, he was like, top cloud nine. He won that day. So be proud of his accomplishments. Cheer him on. Are you as impressed with him today as you were when you were dating? Does he impress you? And maybe his standard bar has fallen. Maybe he is not who he was 20 years ago. Let's be honest, none of us are on either side, right? We're not who we are. We've grown. Hopefully, we've become more mature. We've grown spiritually. We've grown in our marriage. But are you as impressed with him and who he is today? Do you still let him know that? Right? If you were a note writer in college and when you were dating, when's the last time he got a note from you like that? Has it been a while? It's a very simple, effective way to show respect, which shows him love. And that will energize him. So understand, your husband's made for work. That's what he does. Who he is what he accomplishes, what he goes out into the world and does. And that applies at home too. When he fixes something at work, or at home rather, if he fixes something at work, you want him to do more things at home and fix things more, be super impressed by what he did do. Right? Like if he fixes whatever, he fixes the faucet, stops it from leaking, and all he had to do was tighten it, just like, I never would have thought of that. You're so smart. Man, I can't believe it went this whole time. And that's all. You're the best. You're like, yeah, I know. It was real hard. You had to get the right size wrench. Like, I had 3 other ones. I knew those weren't it. I knew the exact one, but I had them just in case. Yeah, it's not that easy, but you're welcome. You're welcome. And he'll look for other things to do. He will. Trust me. He will find things. If you find joy and are proud and impressed by the things he does, he will do more of the things. And he will feel respected, which means he'll feel loved, which means he will show you love because he is energized. And then he will respond in the way that God has made us to respond, and the love will come that you need. And now you're on the energizing cycle, and everything's awesome. You're happy and peaceful, and everything is good. So find ways to show respect to him. So there's a couple helps, and some of these are longer. So tell him verbally and in writing you value his work efforts. It seems simple. It seems almost like kind of corny. It's not corny. If he takes lunch home, or if he takes home lunch to work from home, put a note in his lunchbox. It'll make a difference. Text him in the middle of the day. Whatever. Call him and leave him. If you know he can't answer his phone, call him and leave him a voicemail. It'll do wonders. Tell him you value what he does. Express your faith in him and his related to his field. So tell him he's good at his job. Tell him he's probably the best one to ever do what he does. I don't care if it's true or not. Tell him that's what you believe, and that's what you think. Tell him he's the best at what he does. Listen to his work stories, and I said this already. Listen to his work stories as you expect him to listen to your accounts of what happened in the family. When he comes home talking about work, good or bad, be engaged. Care. Put the timer on the dinner. Tell the kids to shut their mouths. Whatever you need to do, be engaged. Show interest. Talk about what he wants to talk about, not just what you've got in your mind. You've got to tell him, make sure he's got to take care of this, and this. Listen to him. Listen to his work accounts. See yourself, and this is important too. As a wife, see yourself as his helpmate and counterpart, and talk with him about this. So again, Eve, and I know women can work. I know you're not limited. You're a wife, you can't work. God didn't make Eve that way necessarily, but God made Eve specifically to make what was not good with Adam. Like that was why God made Eve. View yourself in that role. It's not subservient. That doesn't mean that you're less than. That doesn't mean you're not as valuable. It's hugely valuable to be your husband's help, to be his completer, to be his counterpart. It's not a downgrade to say you're a helper. It's not a downgrade to say that. Allow him to dream. Guys sometimes dream big, and sometimes they dream crazy. And sometimes they have huge ideas that don't make logical sense. And sometimes you feel as a wife, you got to bring that into check. I get that. But allow him to dream. Allow him to have those dreams. Don't suppress his big talks, his big ideas, his big thoughts. Don't suppress those things. Let him get them out. Talk about them. Now, you may have to interject some logic and some reality. I understand that. But if you just tell him they're terrible and that'll never work, eventually he'll start dreaming. He'll stop dreaming and he'll just kind of be bleh. And you don't want that. You want your husband that wants to do and wants to drive to do more. And then don't dishonor or subtly criticize his work in his field to get him to show more love in the family. Again, don't cut him off at the knees hoping that he'll come over and give you more time and attention. That's not going to work. That's going to have the opposite effect of what you want. You want him to feel energized by his job because you support him. And when he feels that way from you, he will then in turn act in a way that's loving that you need. So, all right, we'll stop there. We'll pray.